Mr. Rogers makes some speedy deliveries at a deliberate pace. And Lady Aberlin asks, what is love? Battle of the Network shows. Join Rick Brooks and Mike Kogel as they explore the TV of the 70s and 80s through hand-picked episodes of their favorite and not-so-favorite series.
Welcome, neighbors, to Battle of the Network shows. I'm Mike.
And I'm Rick. Hello, everyone.
This week we're going to be talking about Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, and I'm sure many of you remember watching this as a kid. I certainly do. And, of course, the last couple of years, Mr. Rogers has sort of had a renaissance, an extended moment, as they might say now, and it's been kind of cool.
Yeah, part of me thinks, though, it's kind of sad, Mike, though, because I kind of think back to a couple of years ago, and I can definitely think, I can kind of pinpoint the time when there was so much going on. There was news, there were episodes coming back, there were documentaries, movies, and I think there was kind of a collective hoping that it would lead to like a shift in tone, and there'd be kinder America and things, and it didn't quite happen the way I think many of us would have liked it to, but I do appreciate the kind of renaissance Mr. Rogers had after some years, not necessarily in the public eye. I think it was tied to the anniversary of the show, and also just kind of like a big nostalgic kick for it. But it looks like the show's never going to totally go away. There's committed efforts to keep the Mr. Rogers legacy going, and a lot of people that think fondly of it enough to keep it going. So that's good, and I think it's really cool that we're doing it on the podcast here.
Yeah. The sort of the big PBS kid shows, at least of our era. Sesame Street, Mr. Rogers, 321 Contact, and Electric Company, right?
Yes, those are I would say, like, what are the four shows that were on PBS like every day when we were kids? Those are the four that I would say.
Right. And as far as kids, to me, the other kids show that would be huge would be like Captain Kangaroo. And then there were other ones that were, came and went, but.
Or more local ones, yeah.
Yeah, or like The Great Space Coaster, or The New Zoo Review, or maybe didn't last as long.
And when we say kid shows, we're kind of going to the younger end of our 2 to 11-year-old
yes.
coveted demographic here.
Right, yeah.
Like more preschool and...
Yes, yeah. And, I think, I'm sure we all go through, there's a point in your life where you think something like Mr. Rogers is pretty corny. But I know I've certainly come back around to just admiring what it is and, what he's doing. Because the other thing, people think, well, it's sort of saccharine and maybe even just, like, too nice, or worse criticism that it's coddling kids and telling them that they're all special in kind of that everyone gets a trophy way, which I don't think is what he's doing. But I was thinking about it, and I mean, one, there are many famous episodes of him tackling pretty serious issues like death and divorce and things like that. But two, I feel like the whole underpinning of it is that, yes, life is hard, but here are some things to make it less difficult. I don't know if you feel that, but like there's never, to me, there's not a backing away from there being problems. Like a lot of times he's saying it's okay to be angry or to be confused, or that you are going to do bad things sometimes. And
yeah, you make mistakes. You might, your parents might be upset sometimes. Your parents might fight. I think, yeah, I don't agree with that at all. That I think it's not a coddling mentality. For one thing, it's geared really at younger kids. I mean, not the kind of kids that are going to be, playing Little League anyway. They're really still in early developmental kids. Wife of the show, Lori, and I have watched a couple of these together, and she made the point. One thing that stood out to her was she didn't watch it as much as a kid as, say, like Sesame Street and some other things. And she believes that part of it was she didn't necessarily need it as much because she had like a stay-at-home mom who loved her and told her that she was special and made her feel that love. She pointed out that many kids didn't have that. I mean, maybe the TV is a babysitter or something, or maybe parents aren't as communicative about that thing, and maybe they do need somebody to tell them that they're special. I don't have a problem with that. I think that's fine.
No, and he's, the special that he's saying, it's just you have value because you're a person.
Right. You're unique just for being you. You don't have to meet, anything else. That certainly doesn't indicate, that you can't strive to be better when you grow up or be the best at what you do or anything like that.
Yeah, or that you're going to be. It's the opposite of saying you're going to be good just for showing up. It's whatever makes you is what makes you special. It's not that you're on the baseball team. It's how you approach whatever it is you're good at. Or
there may be an episode about this, but here's my thinking is kind of going to that thing is I could see it's not like if Mr. Rogers did a thing on like Little League, and the trophy thing, it wouldn't be so much that Mr. Rogers would be determined to give everybody a trophy, but what I could see is and nowadays, everybody gets a trophy, and I don't really have a problem with that. But say there's like one championship trophy, okay? It wouldn't be that Mr. Rogers would have everybody get the same trophy, but I could very easily see Mr. Rogers doing a show about why it's okay not to get the championship trophy.
yes.
Like he would do an episode about it's okay to lose sometimes. It's okay to not be number one at every single thing. And, there's people that might have a problem with that. But we don't need, Bill Belichick, teaching our kids every lesson. I think it's okay to have the younger set get some lessons in kind, gentle behavior and, acceptance of things sometimes.
Yeah, but I am writing down Bill Belichick's Neighborhood for our non-existent sketch comedy.
There you go. Yeah.
Or Sergeant Slaughter's. I don't know Bill Belichick's personality enough, but just anybody just a coach yelling at.
Yeah, and part of his personality is he doesn't have much of one, especially with the media, and a little bit not necessarily in the kind and gentle side as a coach, probably, but he's very effective and a leader of individuals. So,
but seeing this as an adult and seeing the documentary and the Tom Hanks movie, and I found it all. It's not just the nostalgia, but I think the message to me is very moving. And I do feel like I watched Mr. Rogers a lot, and maybe his message didn't always quite sink in terms of self-confidence and things, But my parents loved me, but they were not the most expressive people all the time. So it's nice to watch it and see because I think they talk about this in the documentary, and it's been a few years since I saw it, but he reaches through the TV.
Yeah.
And we're used to other people looking at you, talk show hosts and everything, and newscasters. But there's just something about it. He's just like reaching out right to you, whether you're 40-something or 4.
He was an extremely effective communicator, and I think part of the reason was he was very focused on what his children would think, and he built his show around their reactions. And that's one thing that distinguishes him from a lot of other even children's television that we've covered. He wasn't trying to get ironic reactions, or he wasn't trying to get adults. I mean, if they watch, that's fine, and many of the lessons could apply to them, but he was so focused on the kids, and it came out, and his sincerity made him an extremely effective communicator. And one of the ways he did that was like just things like that direct contact and eye contact. Like a lot of times, even when he's singing or doing some other task, he makes it a point to remain focused on the camera, which comes through. And that's something that even a lot of the television hosts at the time didn't do. They were, focused on skits or interacting with other characters and things like that. And even in that field of kids television, Mr. Rogers stands out as a performer and communicator.
Yeah. Now, here are my only 2. These aren't even gripes. These are things I disagree with him on.
Okay.
One, in the right context, it is funny to see somebody trip. Because you see interviews with him, and that was one of the motivating things. Like, he didn't understand why people laughed at those kind of things. And, of course, having also grown up on G.I. Joe and He-Man and all of that stuff, it's hard to totally agree with him about commercial television.
Yeah, I mean,
I understand.
I understand, but I'm kind of glad that there was both.
Yeah.
I like there being both, and I think it was absolutely a good thing to have like sort of a counterweight to the rest of television, and he provided an alternative. And you know what? I think also I agree on both your points, by the way, but I think it's one thing that makes the show stand out today is after maybe the last 20, 30 years of television, the show looks so much better, I think, to us because of its calmness, because of the pacing is just something you don't see on television anymore, and it feels fresh because it's not so hyperactive and because it's so calm and the whole tone of it is unlike so much of what's on all television, let alone, and forget, kids television especially. And I think the show looks better for it now.
There are a lot of those kids shows that sort of address the kid the same way, right? Like Blue's Clues or something.
Blue's Clues, even like you could say like Dora, but I mean
Elmo's World. Sesame Street does it to an extent anyway. I mean, they're always say, "Oh, hi there," but they don't do it It's, usually once they say hi to the audience, they're kind of moving on to whatever's happening. But the Elmo's World segments were a lot like Blue's Clues, patterned and having kids help out with solve whatever little problem was going on.
Yeah, I mean, I feel it's a little bit more gimmicky, not the same way as having an adult who's essentially, playing a character, but is more essentially playing himself, and isn't really. It's more of like a teaching thing as opposed to interactive and just expecting them to shout back to the TV. It's just sort of like anticipating. It's sort of giving them what they need instead of what they want in a lot of ways. And he seemed pretty good at knowing what they need, and maybe he wasn't perfect, but he seemed to accomplish a lot on this show.
Mm-hmm. And in a general sense too, I just love the music. I mean, the way it kind of reacts to what he's saying, and just the sound of it, the piano, and the slightly jazzy part of it.
Yeah, the cues and little things like the trolley song. I just love that music.
Yeah, and it's all, of course, happening as it's happening as they're recording it. It's not John Costa and the other musicians are reacting to what he's doing.
Since you mention it, other than the episode we're focusing on today, I happened to watch another one just today where he talks about his job. It's fascinating. He actually, like, at one point they pan back, and show the studio. But when he's explaining what he does, one of the first things he mentions is he says that he makes music, and he shows up like a sheet music of one of the songs, the recurring songs on the shows, and he seems like to really emphasize that that he's a songwriter and stuff. And I guess that was very important. I mean, he studied music, right? And he wrote most of the music on the show. But I thought it was interesting that he didn't just see himself as a television performer, and he thought a vital part of that was the music. So it was clearly very important to him that the music on the show be effective and good stuff.
And it was. Yeah, I want to watch that. I'm always interested in seeing that behind the scenes stuff.
Yeah, it was really bizarre. Like, I had no idea that he ever did that to that extent.
I knew about it, but now, what do you think? In the world of the show, right? He's coming to his television home. Mm-hmm. In this episode, he actually refers it as that. So he seems to be coming from work, like it's his break. Yeah. So I wonder what his job, that Fred Rogers job is. Like, is he just coming from planning the show, or he's in his work clothes. He, of course, changes out of his work shoes and his from a jacket to a cardigan and.
I always kind of saw it as him planning the show, I guess. Like writing and maybe making music. But that's a good question. But yeah, it's weird because it's kind of like, in some ways, this is like the original, like a predecessor to It's Gary Shandling's show.
Yeah.
I mean, Burns and Allen had the, the talking to the camera gimmick, of course, and other shows did. But this is a guy whose life sort of is the show, but there's some kind of life outside the show as well.
And, I know sometimes he would bring his wife or kids on the show, like they were coming to visit. Like, he didn't, I don't know. There is a fiction to it, but then there's not a fiction to it. It's an interesting aspect of it. And as a kid, I know I never understood why he was, changing his shoes and all of that.
Yeah.
I'm sure I loved the ritual of it, but I just didn't know, the why of it. And even as an adult, I'm like, well, I mean, I come home and I take off my shoes, but I don't then put on a different pair of shoes usually.
Yeah.
And I might change clothes, well, when I was working in not at home. I might change clothes when I get home. But that was because I was going to bed soon. So.
Yeah.
But I do understand having like a sweatshirt or something to keep you warm that is just at home. So, it's interesting. And it is mesmerizing.
Yes.
Yeah. Anyway. So did you watch it a lot as a kid?
I did watch this a lot as a kid. I in my memory, I think I probably saw Sesame Street more. I kind of associate Sesame Street. I think in many markets, Mr. Rogers and Sesame Street aired twice a day, maybe in the mornings and the afternoon. But Sesame Street is the one I seem to remember being on more, and I seem to remember watching Sesame Street more. Mr. Rogers is more of an occasional thing, or maybe not quite as much once I got to a certain age, whereas Sesame Street, I probably watched that a little bit more later. But yeah, I did watch it a lot, and I remember, and then I didn't see much of it for years. I knew of it, but yeah, I think it was for a while, at least for a couple of years, it must have been part of my daily routine. I think Sesame Street and Mr. Rogers probably back to back. Maybe I'd be doing something else, but a lot of times I probably watch both of those every on the weekday.
Yeah, I imagine kids grew out of Mr. Rogers before they grew out of Sesame Street too.
Yeah, I think so. Now, I also had younger sisters, so that might have kind of prolonged both shows a little bit for me. But I don't. I seem to remember once they were getting older that Mr. Rogers wasn't as big as he was, when I was that age. So I don't know. I was kind of surprised, like looking back, that Mr. Rogers aired as long as it did. It seemed like, in looking at the production history, it looks like for a while they were cranking out tons of episodes, and then they really scaled back and were running mostly older episodes.
Yeah, and even kind of took a break for a while.
Yeah.
Tried to make a show for grown-ups.
Yeah, and even then, the show lasted in reruns on PBS for longer than I thought.
Yeah, and and there's still the company is still making these, like Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood and Don Quixote, I think, is theirs too, which is nice. They're keeping that legacy out there in different ways. So yeah, if people haven't seen that documentary, I highly recommend that.
Now, were there two documentaries that came out, or you talking about the one with Michael Keaton?
I mean, that one's fine. The one that was a theatrical release.
Okay, yeah, that's right.
Won't You Be My Neighbor?
That's right. And there was one on there's a PBS special.
Yeah.
Anniversary special with Michael Keaton.
Yes, yeah. And that was nice. But the theatrical one really is good. And then, and the Tom Hanks movie is good too.
Yeah, I've not seen the Tom Hanks movie.
It's a little Hollywood in places, I guess. It just in kind of, I assume, simplifying the story between him and this reporter. And of course, it's really about the reporter, but Tom Hanks is really good in it, and it has some clever storytelling things that fit in with the show.
And from what I remember from the trailers, adding the car chases was probably a little bit Hollywood too.
Yeah, but they are a little model car.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Going through a little model town. Anyway, the episode we're going to do is from the year of my birth. And it's episode 1309.
A very catchy title. Oh, yeah. No, yeah. What is Love is, I guess, is the title.
Right, yeah. Which unfortunately keeps putting that song in my head.
Yeah. That's right, yeah. I mean, it's a question that's been asked in various forms over the years, and we'll see how Mr. Rogers does with it, but that was in my head all throughout this as well, and I wasn't thrilled about it. And, by the way, before we get started, I will say, I won't reveal the year, but the information that we saw on the website, the big... was it Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood Archive, indicates that this premiered April 26th. It's tricky, though, with PBS shows. Like, I can't really tell you what else was on PBS because all the PBS schedules were, locally controlled. So this episode likely premiered on that day, which was a Thursday, and that's really all I can say about it. It likely was on maybe before or after Sesame Street and could have been on a couple times that day.
So it opens, as every Mr. Rogers does, of course, with a little model town neighborhood and Mr. Rogers coming in and singing that "Won't You Be My Neighbor," and then we learn he's been helping out with the Speedy Delivery while Mr. McFeely's been out of town. He's been working hard.
He is, and Fred seems a really good neighbor because revisiting the show a little bit for the podcast here, I see a bunch of episodes where he's doing favors for other neighbors. He's a good guy to live near.
Right, yeah. Even if he only lives there an hour a day.
Yeah, that's right.
Or half an hour a day.
Yeah.
And of course, if you remember the show, Mr. McFeely would Speedy Delivery and bring over little films and stuff to play in picture. And
I believe, like, growing up, I think Mr. McFeely was in many ways as popular as Mr. Rogers.
Really?
I mean, he was. I think he was the breakout character for a lot of people. I just remember probably because the name, which I guess I didn't realize until that was Mr. Rogers' middle name. I guess was McFeely or something.
And I think it was one of it's a family name, like last name too.
Okay, yeah, I had no idea. Of course, a kid, but yeah, I just remember Mr. McFeely being referenced as much as Rogers. He was the one guy that I think everybody knew. Besides Mr. Rogers.
Yeah, I know before I had revisited this in different ways that I'd sort of forgotten about a lot of the human characters. Chef Brockett came along. And
I believe we mentioned Chef Brockett way back in one of our bonus episodes. When we did TV Chefs, I think we did a Listorama on TV Chefs. I think we mentioned him.
I forgot we did a Listorama on TV Chefs.
Yeah, this is way back.
Yeah.
This is way back. I'll put a link in the show notes, but yeah, it happened. Yeah,
I believe he gets listed as oh yeah, that's right. Mr. Rogers had to deliver 2 sacks of flour to him.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's one of the things I like about this in the introduction is we don't necessarily see all these characters, but Fred name checks many of them by rattling off this big list of deliveries he had. He names, including Chef Brockett and the Sweeneys, Bob Trow. I didn't really remember the Sweeneys. He mentions the doctor, Elsie, I guess who we see later, Joe Negri, handyman. Well, handyman and make-believe, sorry.
Yes, and music store owner.
Yes.
And fine guitar player in real life.
Yeah.
Or music store owner. Both. I don't know if he owned a music store in real life, but
No.
he is a fine guitar player, though.
But, as someone who's not watching the show every day now, I really like that touch because it's like, oh, yeah, right away he's establishing the fact that there's this community and he's doing all this stuff for people that we, as the audience, the kids, would recognize these people. So that's cool.
And he's got something on his list for Elsie, as you mentioned, Elsie Neal. He's not sure if he needs to deliver something or to pick something up. So he calls her, and this is a thing that another time when I saw this episode, so he uses a touch-tone phone in 1973. I know we had rotary phones like at least into the early 80s, I think. So I kind of looked up, and Pittsburgh was one of the first places that had touch-tone.
Wow. Hey, good on you, Pittsburgh.
Yeah. And one of my, I don't know why he put that in, but he dials a number, and then he's like, asks for, he's like, oh, I must have dialed the wrong number.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah. He's obviously, in this case, not really calling people, but, and he's, of course, very polite about it. And, and then he calls, and she's not there, as her daughter is. And he finds out that he needs to go, or he's going to wait for her to call back, and says, call me at my TV home.
Yeah.
And then we jump, that was interesting to me, too. Like of course, a lot of those kid shows we mentioned earlier, like, Blue's Clues and stuff, have a very set format.
Mm-hmm.
The show is not, there are things, but he goes straight from that to the neighborhood of make-believe, in the first few minutes of the show. I usually expect that to come near the end, but not this episode. And of course, there are episodes where they don't go there, and episodes where he leaves the house, and all sorts of different things. So I appreciate that.
Right.
There's structure, but it's not rigid. It's like jazz.
Yes.
So he gets, Charlie out, sends him off to the neighborhood of make-believe, and we learned that, I guess in a previous episode, King Friday the 13th and Queen Sarah had been arguing.
Yeah, this is one thing that I had forgotten, is that it had a Monday through Friday thing, and for a while at least, there would be little storylines and continuity that would play out over the course of a week. So, it wasn't the only show that did that, but a lot of other shows, like big shows, were more standalone things. And this one, yeah, I guess, especially, I guess, in Make-Believe, right, that these storylines would play out over multiple days.
Right, covering the kind of the same idea over that time. So we missed them arguing, and I'll say I kind of would have enjoyed
yeah.
that, just because King Friday is a standout character to me.
Yeah, I'm a little disappointed, too, that we didn't get to see them arguing. I might have to try to find that.
I guess he's probably standing in for sort of the way parents look to kids sometimes, but because he seems very... he's not just an authoritarian, but he's sort of mercurial or capricious in his decision-making. Sometimes it takes a lot of convincing for him to change his mind on things. But in the context of the way it comes across, it's pretty humorous usually, I think.
Right.
And of course, Mr. Rogers is at least doing the voice. King Friday. Although in this particular episode, he's not so much that way.
He's a little subdued.
Yeah, so... his niece, Lady Aberlin, is, I don't know, she seems bewildered by something, a little upset or something.
Yes, very confused, a little,
frankly, she always seems a little bewildered. But yeah, in this case, something is bothering her, and she won't tell the Queen and King what's bothering her. And so at the beginning, he's practicing his bass violin, and they seem to be getting along just fine.
Right.
So she goes off wandering the neighborhood to find out, and she goes to visit X the Owl, who I also enjoy.
X the Owl is probably my favorite character in Make-Believe. I don't know why, but I'm glad to see him, and I think he was my favorite character growing up, and I'm not sure why. I think I love the character design on him. It just seems cool, and I love that his name is X. There's just something about him. I always dug that character, so very glad to see him in this one.
So she asks him, what is love? And he's like, well, Benjamin Franklin is sure to know.
Yeah.
That's probably why you liked him, right?
Yeah. His love of Ben Franklin, that's something I instantly identified with him.
So he takes out a Benjamin Franklin book, but fortunately this time, poor Richard didn't have the answer either.
No, it's a tough question, and I would like to think that if they looked hard enough, there would have been a couple of proverbs that might have gotten at least a little closer to the answer.
Right?
They
Well,
gave up on it pretty quickly.
some of Benjamin Franklin's thoughts on love might not have been appropriate for
Well,
this show.
You've got a point there. Yes, you do have a point.
Anyway, she moves on and she runs into Robert Troll, who, on the other hand, might be my least favorite character.
Yes, partly for professional reasons,
Yes,
as I recall.
Although he's pretty subdued here.
Yes.
And he tries to explain to her that love is a feeling and you have to feel it. And Robert Troll, we should say, if you don't know, is played by a human. He's not a puppet, but he's played by Bob Trow, who also plays one of the neighbors, and also played Bob the dog at some point.
Yeah.
And it's a good answer, but it's not a good answer.
Right.
Like, it's not what she's looking for. So she moves on and runs into Lady Elaine, another character who now I enjoy that character now, but as a kid, she was definitely had what you call go away heat.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you. Same. I didn't care for her either. I was wondering, Mike, should we discuss the rather striking resemblance between Lady Elaine and Madam of Wayland Flowers and Madam fame?
I hadn't thought about that, but
Okay, well, maybe it's just me, but I thought that, and Lori called that out while we were watching, and I think Lori wasn't really fond of the character. Like the self-absorbed nature of the character, was just something that didn't really appeal to us. But I enjoyed Madam and Wayland Flowers a little bit more. But unfortunately, they weren't in this episode. But although in this case, to be fair, Lady Elaine actually has some decent advice. At least she contributes to the conversation more than she often does.
yes. Well, right. Her role is often sort of she's the closest thing to a villain, I would say. Or, she's mischievous. She causes a lot of problems.
Yeah, she's an agent of chaos.
Yes.
Do you think Fred Rogers...
trying to avoid the trickster word, but yeah.
Do you think Fred Rogers was like, what we need an agent of chaos on this show? Well, in wide-eyed, he explained to everybody else his vision for the Elaine character by saying that. No, probably not.
Probably not. And she's named after his sister or something.
Oh,
Or
okay.
After some, okay. But yeah, she does have some good advice.
I mean, she kind of gets across, the idea that, you have to love yourself, and which is something that Elaine is very good at.
Yes.
I mean, she's good at admiring herself, which she's doing in this scene, but somewhere in there is a decent message about, it's not just loving other people, you should love yourself too. That's okay to do that,
Right, and she also kind of was like, well, Friday and Sarah are mad about each other. That's why they fight sometimes.
Yeah.
And then says maybe you should go talk to Queen Sarah about this. Right. She goes and talks to Queen Sarah and gets a better idea for it. And Queen Sarah explains that understanding love is one of the hardest things in the world. And but that just because they fought, that doesn't mean they don't love each other. So in this case, it seems like Lady Aberlin is playing sort of the role of the child.
Mm-hmm.
And other times she's more adult. Like she helps Daniel Striped Tiger out. A lot of times. And yeah, we should mention some of the other inhabitants of the neighborhood of Make Believe. There's Daniel Tiger, of course, and Henrietta Pussycat.
Yes, that was the one that talked in meow.
Meows.
Yeah, okay,
Yes.
yeah.
I think there's a French character, right, who lives in the Eiffel Tower.
Oh, yeah.
And people from one of the neighboring neighborhoods come over a lot. I remember seeing a whole storyline where there's a whole big water project between all the neighborhoods so they can have a neighborhood pool.
Yes,
that they all use.
With neighbor Aber and like people with like real jobs and responsibilities.
Yeah, there's a mayor and.
It seemed to me like, I could be wrong on this, but it seemed to me like maybe that happened more as the show went on in later years. Like Make Believe, the land of Make Believe expanded a little bit in the sense that it was clearly part of like some other more real world-ish type community.
Of course, Andy Negri, we already mentioned him.
Yeah, I like him.
There's some platypuses for a while. All sorts of people. Keith David was on for a while. Was a character on the show, which is pretty weird to see, but it's pretty neat. Because, of course, Pittsburgh has Carnegie Mellon, which is a big theater.
And apparently Michael Keaton got his start on Mr. Rogers.
Yes, and I mean, I think he was mostly working behind the scenes, but he was did other things too, which is also cool.
Should we mention now Lady Elaine? I'm sorry, not Lady Elaine. Lady Aberlin, because I mixed those names up. Niece Aberlin / Betty Aberlin, Lady Aberlin. Lori had asked me, she was curious if I had a crush on her, when I was a little kid. And I think the answer to that is maybe sort of. But I think I just thought, wow, she's just a nice, pretty lady. I thought of her more as like a princess type, especially with like the being of royal lineage, of course, and everything that made sense. But I saw her differently as some of my early celebrity crushes. I just saw her a little bit different, more of like as kind of like family, like a certain distance there. So I don't necessarily put her in the same category as I would our holy trinity of brunettes, Linda Carter, Erin Gray, and Connie Selica.
I honestly kind of didn't remember her, so I'm going to say no.
Interesting.
Just based on that. Yeah. But again, I said, like I said, I had kind of forgotten a lot of the grown-ups.
I think she may have been in. She probably was in a ton more episodes than Mr. McFeely. I still stand by my assertion that McFeely, at least in my set growing up, was one of the breakout characters. But looking back, Lady Aberlin, she was probably in just about every episode, whereas McFeely was more of just a constant presence, but certainly wasn't in every episode by a long shot.
And I'll say too that I can kind of remember like just always anticipating going to the neighborhood of make believe. Like that's the part I wanted to see the most. No offense to Mr. Rogers, but obviously puppets and trolleys and stuff.
I think I like both. I think Lori said that she preferred the make believe too, which is interesting. Although I think she did enjoy some of the vignettes, like making things like she remembered like the crayon making, maybe one of their most famous like how things are done things. I don't remember having a strong preference over the other ones, but I mean part of it is like I just associate the live action segments so much with like the beginning and end, and it seems like that's a lot of it. So to me, those blend together a little bit easier because of that formula. Whereas make believe, it seemed like anything could happen. It wasn't so dependent on like a standard beginning and opening and things. So to me, that feels a little bit wide open. So I think looking back, those segments stand out a little bit more to me. But yeah, I guess I think I like both equally probably.
So back in the normal world, Mr. Rogers, he sings one of his songs, Many Ways to Say I Love You, and he checks on some plants that he has that he's taking care of for the McFeelys. It's like, oh, I don't have to water them today.
Yeah, his song, like The Asking Way or something, is a nice little song. And, overall, I think they do a pretty good job of getting at this question, what is love? I mean, how can you really get to this? It's such a complex issue. And I don't know if you can't really explain it all, but they did a good job of at least getting across the main idea that, your parents or adults can yell at each other and be angry with each other, yet still love each other. And I think that came across pretty well.
And kind of the point of the song that he makes, too, is that it's okay to ask people about it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's how you're going to learn about it. It's okay to want to know these things and understand your feelings.
Right.
Again, very, I think, good lessons that I probably could have learned better. But,
yeah.
I don't disagree with him. And then he talks to Elsie on the phone and goes over, he's got to pick up some costumes. So Elsie's making costumes for a big wild play at the college. And this is just a really fun scene of him being curious, which is another one of the great qualities of him, I think. He's interested in everything.
Yeah. Now, and to his credit, he asked permission first to try stuff on, and then he goes through and he's like, you get the impression he could be there for hours, like trying everything on.
Right. Yeah. So he's mostly trying on these heads that I guess someone else had made, but there's an elephant head and there's a king head that looks like King Friday.
Yeah, I had kind of an issue with that, Mike. He picks up the head and kind of uses the voice, and it's like, is he exposing the business?
I don't think he has a problem with exposing.
I guess he doesn't.
You saw that other episode, right?
That's right, where he shows that he's on an actual set. But I'm a little disappointed by this. I thought in 1973, I thought Mr. Rogers would still be protecting the business a little bit more. But,
yeah.
I guess he was okay with, kind of doing that king voice in the costume was a little much for me, but...
I think he would show the puppets sometimes. Show that they're puppets. And
oh, yeah, he does, but it's rare to have him associated, I think, directly, at least in my memory, to have him directly associate himself with those voices like that. But, I did see just another episode where he actually shows the puppets and holds them up, but...
Yes.
Well, that was totally, exposing the business. That was That was years after this, though, too. But, he puts on a donkey head at one point, Mike.
I was trying to remember that one because
Do you think there's another half of that costume?
I do, yeah. And the giraffe, too. But the donkey head was cool because it had a little string so you could move the ears.
Yeah, that was actually one of the more... I mean, a couple of them are cartoonish costumes, heads, and a couple of them are actually really realistic. Like, there's a lion head that's really cool.
Right. And, I mean, the giraffe one was very tall, of course. But you could see the suit hanging on the hanger.
Yeah.
And it looked to me like it was a two-person suit.
Yeah, I think so.
So, I think if our dream of a horse-suit act falls through, or a pantomime horse, as they call it, like maybe a giraffe act.
There you go. I mean... I can imagine many jaded venue owners, maybe rejecting us at first until, oh, no, we don't do a horse act. We do a giraffe act. Oh, hey, I haven't seen a giraffe act in years.
Right.
You boys are booked.
And then he tries on a Renaissance hat on the way out.
Yeah, he kind of puts it on like, he's like, oh, hey, this is cool. Like, tries it on. And there was a little thing, too, which I liked about Elsie point out that, because he says something like, boy, it'd be very difficult for kids to make these, which is true because they're really good, like mass and everything. And she brings out some that kids did do that were, a little bit more simpler but more effective, like a little dog head, costume that's simpler but effective on a child's head. And that was a nice little touch. We, after seeing all this cool stuff, the show also takes pains to say that, kids can do stuff, even if it's not necessarily on that level, they can do stuff in their own way, which is still pretty fun to play with. So
yeah, and I was going to say about that. So he gets whatever he's taking and puts it in this box, and he can't get the lid on.
Yeah,
this is another one of those real moments and he's just like, this is hard to get on.
Yeah, that's right.
I just love that he's willing to acknowledge what's happening, not ask for a reshoot or something.
Yes. Yeah, she says that they're destined to... These costumes need to go to the state college, some generic thing. I don't think it's, University of Pittsburgh or Carnegie Mellon or Robert Morris or anything. And I was a little disappointed because I thought, well, maybe he'll take him to the state college. I'm like, no, it's too late in the episode for that, I guess. I kind of want to see that, but he says he'll do it later.
Did you say Robert Morse University?
Yes.
It's
Robert Morris, Pittsburgh area.
Morris, not Morse.
Oh, no, not Robert Morse. Yes. Sorry, Robert Morris. Well, there's a great, theater department at Robert Morris University.
Yes, and of course teaches how a married man can pretend to be single.
Yes, that's right.
Anyway, he goes home and he sings "You Are Special," which is one of the sign-off songs, and it was a very nice song and reiterates that theme we were talking about before of, saying people are special by just being themselves. That's what makes them special.
That's right.
And he reassures you that he'll see you tomorrow.
Now, speaking of tomorrow, he kind of closes with "It's such a good feeling." Can I ask you something? I'm trying to find information about this. The song I remember so much, "Tomorrow." Okay, tomorrow we'll do it again tomorrow or whatever. I was stunned to see that was apparently only used for like 4 or 5 years. I thought that was one of the songs I most associated with the show. And I don't know when I would have seen it, maybe just watching reruns, or maybe there was an album or something that I played, but that song is one of my most remembered songs from the series, but it seems like he essentially retired it after a short period of time. Am I missing something? Did you remember that song? Do you know what song I'm talking about?
Yeah, I think so. I know there's a different one if it's the end of the week, but he does go into, I'm looking at the Neighborhood site, and it doesn't, he did the weekend song, because this is the end of the week. So he's saying, I'll be back when the week is new, and I'll bring you more ideas, and you'll have things you'll want to do, and I will too. But he did do the snappy new that thing, right? I watched 3 episodes, so I'm confused. But I'll be back when the days.
I mean, that was in the Tomorrow song, I think, maybe. So maybe the weekend song was a reworking of the Tomorrow song.
Oh, it's it's such a good feeling. It's such a good feeling to know you're alive. It's such a happy feeling and when you wake up and ready to say, I think I'll make a snappy new day. Yeah, some of those lyrics are in the Tomorrow song too. One of the other episodes I watched, I think, had that Tomorrow song, and I thought it was weird because the melody didn't sound like this.
Yeah, okay. Well, yeah, I'm not sure what's going on with me in the Tomorrow song, but I guess that'll just be a mystery. I thought, is this like a Mandela effect thing here where Apparently, it was the official closing song for a while, but before I was even born, I guess they got rid of it. So, another thing before we leave this episode, I want to mention is, what my favorite part of, I think, of the Mr. Rogers TV home is? It's that little stoplight thing that, you see kind of in between it sort of effectively serves as a divider between his living room and his kitchen, I guess. It's kind of right there. You see a lot when he's feeding the fish or whatever, but I always thought that was like the coolest thing to have in your house.
Yeah, and it's just there.
Yeah.
As far as I know, he doesn't do anything with it, but that is neat. I feel like I brought this up on here before, maybe not. But in my elementary school, they had like a traffic light in the cafeteria, and it measured sound. So if the kids got too loud, it would turn red, and then we'd have to shut up.
Ooh, I like that. They wouldn't even give you a yellow. They just go straight to red.
No, there was yellow.
Okay.
And like whatever teacher was on duty would kind of give us the what for. But
wow, I like that.
I don't know why why it had to be a certain volume, but I guess they just felt like we were being too obnoxious if we got too loud. But you got an entire grade's worth of kids.
Yeah.
In there.
There's going to be some hooting and hollering, a little carrying on.
Right. Not throwing food at each other.
Yeah.
Just talking about Mr. Rogers.
Yeah.
Or Battlestar Galactica or something.
Talking about Mr. Rogers.
By the time that was happening, it might have been the A-Team or something.
I like the idea of kids breaking down episodes of Mr. Rogers and Robert Troll's explanation of love versus, X the Owl's approach to the subject. And
right.
Could happen. I do remember talking about the show as a kid, but I'm not sure exactly what we talked about.
Yeah. I don't know.
I don't think we were talking about some of the issues we're talking about on the podcast here. I don't think we would quite have been going into some of that, but but another thing I like after the song and the end credits, there's kind of like another card comes up with sponsor information and that little flourish of end music they have there. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. That
was really cool. That I get nostalgia for that too. That just that little bit of music there at the end is cool. Kind of backing up what you were saying about how great the tunes are in general on this series.
I believe this clip also had the scary PBS.
The bad PBS logo at the end.
Yes.
the scary one. Yeah, that was kind of. I am glad that it's here on the clip. Don't get me wrong, but as a kid, I definitely had a love-hate relationship with that ID. It was a little intense. And definitely too intense for Mr. Rogers, in my opinion. Anybody that thinks that kids were coddled by Mr. Rogers, you got to think, kids were watching it to the end. They're going to see that logo at the end to remind them that not everything is, peaceful in this world. That there's looming danger.
In the form of letter-shaped people.
Yeah. Watching you. Judging you.
Right. But as I learned from another episode, Santa Claus is not watching you. He's not a spy. He can also look like and act like anybody, or anybody can look and act like him.
Wow, I didn't know the versatility worked both ways like that, but I guess it makes sense. It fits in with some other things I've been wondering about Santa Claus.
The Rankin Bass didn't cover those ideas, but
no.
I'm sure they appreciated someone adding to the mythology.
Yeah.
Well, I was very happy to talk about this.
Yeah, I'm glad that it exists. It's not something that I personally am going to watch a lot, although there's a couple of more episodes that I'm curious about. And maybe we should mention, Mike, a lot of episodes are available. There was a big DVD set that came out a couple of years ago. There's some on Prime Video right now that are part of Prime, and there's also some that you can buy as individual episodes. And the PBS Kids app has a bunch of free selections, and there's also like a PBS Kids channel on Amazon, I think, that has more episodes maybe. That's paid. Like when I go to the PBS Kids channel on my Roku, I don't see an option to buy anything at all. But it's a really like kind of no frills thing that's geared just towards like plug and play for kids to watch, stuff. So, but there were like, I think about, maybe like 10 or so like 1980s episodes, and Prime has more like this one, like the 1970s episodes as part of their Prime package, but there's other ones you can buy. So, if you're not going to, watch reruns, and remember like a while ago when Twitch for some reason did like, I guess it was to tie in with the anniversary, ran like 90% of the episodes in one big marathon.
Right.
That was one of the most bizarre things I think I've seen lately, but it was cool that they did it. And they had a Twitch channel for a while, but I don't know if that's even still around, if you can watch the episodes that way. But there are episodes around if you want to watch some of the old ones.
I was reading about the Tomorrow Song.
Do you have more information about the Tomorrow Song?
I think this is probably what you read. But so it does, yeah, the snappy is in both versions, that and the It's Such a Good Feeling. The song was used to close nearly every episode until it was replaced by Such a Good Feeling. Sung to the same tune as It's Morning. In one episode, Lady Elaine is excited about presents to be given by the platypus family and sings a variation of this song called Tomorrow, Tomorrow, the platypuses come tomorrow, and I'll be right here tomorrow. And it appeared in episodes 1 through 1244, and then one more episode.
Okay. Well, this was 1309.
Yes, the numbering is on the episodes is interesting too. I mean, I don't think we're watching the 1300th episode.
But this would be like maybe the 13th season or something.
Okay, so this is like the 309th episode.
Okay.
I think. I guess it would be the 409th technically. So there's 0 through 130, and then there's like it starts over with a 1, and then so you get 1-1. It starts over with 1 and goes up to 130, I think, and then it goes all the way up to 200, and then 200 to 3. Okay, so ignore the first 1, and it makes more sense.
Suddenly, I feel ashamed for being so confused, and I was trying to figure out our 100th episode for the Night of 100 Stars thing we did a while back.
Yeah.
Because that was nothing compared to this.
Right.
Well, thanks for clearing that up.
Yeah. No. Anyway. It's certainly not the 1300th episode.
No. There's a ton of episodes. And they're available. And there's a lot of episodes of Battle of the Network shows. And they are all free for your listening pleasure and all the places where you found this one. And also on our website, battleofthenetworkshows.com. And visit us there and check out the website. We've got stuff up there. And you can reach us at mailbag@battleofthenetworkshows.com if you got questions, suggestions, comments, anything like that. And also join us in our Facebook group.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Let us know your Mr. Rogers memories. If you ever had any Mr. Rogers books or hand puppets or anything. A trolley, maybe?
I never had any merch, but I do have the Mr. Rogers Funko that came out with him holding the trolley.
Oh, cool.
And he's right here in my desk watching us. Not judging us, but watching us.
Right, yeah. Okay, well, if there weren't copyright things, we would play that song we were talking about.
Yes, and...
it's Such a Good Feeling in the Weekend song, not tomorrow, because...
well, plus, we won't see you tomorrow. You won't hear from us tomorrow, although you can join us on the website, but we'll be back next week with another episode.
Although, I mean, you could listen to an episode tomorrow.
That's true. You certainly could.
Well over 100 of those. Okay. Have a good day, folks.
It would be unseemly to take sponsorship for an episode about Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, so we'll just remind you to visit our TeePublic store for official BOTNS t-shirts, mugs, pillows, tapestries, and more. Sorry, no tote bags.